join me today at the wheel of something a little unusual. You may have seen one in The Simpsons with Marge's sisters Patty and Selma at the wheel. This is a Volkswagen Thing.
Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk. So this is a slightly unusual one really, the German Jeep if you like, the not posh G-Wagon. This is the car which goes by many names. Officially it's the VW Type 181, apart from in England where it's the VW Type 182. Well, Volkswagen built it from 1968 until 1983, and considering it was only intended as a very brief stopgap, that's quite a long production run. Now conceptually it's very similar to the Kubelwagen, which was the actual German off-road vehicle of the Second World War. In the 1950s the West German Army did approach VW and say could they build something similar again, but Volkswagen weren't really interested. In the 60s when there was a project called Eurojeep happening, which is a NATO idea to have a Europe-wide four-wheel drive off-road military light vehicle that, like the American Jeep of the Second World War, could be built in multiple plants using components from lots of factories, so it could be repaired, built, constructed and kept going from any number of suppliers. While that was still, you know, in concept form, the German army wanted something to drive around in, obviously. So they approached Volkswagen again, who this time realised that there was a civilian application which they might be able to make a bit of extra cash out of. So they revived the old Kubelwagen concept, all new components this time, but very similar idea. If you kind of squint at this and look at the old 40s car, you can certainly see a lot of similarities. But that civilian thing was a good idea because it was built in multiple factories around the world and it was sold under lots of different names as well. In its home market in Germany, it was the Courierwagen. I won't try the accent, the Courierwagen perhaps. Okay, I tried the accent. In Britain it was the Trekker. In America it was called the Thing. But in Mexico and South America it was called the Safari because Pontiac already had the name Safari for their station wagon, so they couldn't use that in North America. And in Italy it was known as the Pescaccia. Pescacia, if you look at it on paper. As you look around the bodywork and styling of this car, it looks a bit like you've asked a child to draw a beetle on an Etch-a-Sketch, but they've gone a bit too blocky. It uses lots of part-spin Volkswagen components, which helps keep the costs down, but on this flat stamped panel work, which again keeps the cost down. All this interesting ribbing, which gives it so much character and so much of its individuality, is really because it's just unbacked metal. It's there to give strength and rigidity to these big flat panels. So these things were built all around the world, initially in Wolfsburg, then Hanover, Indonesia, and where this one came from, Mexico. Now, as I mentioned, apart from the panel work, it's all just part-spin Volkswagen stuff off the shelf, making construction fairly quick and easy. Until 1973, the rear axle and transmission was the swing axle and reduction gear from a Transporter. After 73, it uses the double-jointed axles and semi-trailing independent rear suspension from a 1303 Beetle, although it's got the bigger 1600 engine in it. The floor pan, a lot of people think is a Beetle, but it's not. It's actually a Type 1 Karmann gear, because that's ever so slightly wider. And of course, all the other running gear, electrical parts, those are all off-the-shelf parts. Look at this indicator and headlamp unit. That's straight off a Beetle, but this time mounted onto a big flat wing. And here at the back, these taillights, they too are straight off I think a 1303 Beetle as well, aren't they? Now, as you'd expect, in a 70s Volkswagen, it's air-cooled and the engine's here in the back. Originally it was a 1.5, later it was a 1600, and this is I think the 1600cc, making 46 horsepower. Obviously it's air-cooled, and there's ventilation running through from the side panel here in the back, on both sides actually, exiting by the twin exhausts down here with a wonderful, you know, iconic chugga sound. These old flat fours are brilliant. They're so reliable, they're so simple, they go on forever if you look after them. They may not be fast, may not be powerful, but you can trust them, and they work in pretty much all weathers. But these didn't actually start selling to the general public, to civilians, until 1971. In the UK they only went on sale in 1975, but the reception was not spectacular and the sales were poor, so it only lasted 1 year. In North America it was only available in 73, 74, withdrawn in 75, so although it was very popular in a lot of places, Mexico in particular, in a lot of other places it didn't really live a very long life at all. Now here under the front of the car, under the bonnet, hood, front lid, I don't know what you want to call it, that's that weird kind of not really properly named part of a rear-engined car covering the boot area at the front. This is partly a storage area, if you don't mind that storage smelling a little bit of petrol, because here in the middle we've got our fuel tank. We also have an Erbspacher petrol-powered heater to warm the cabin up. It wouldn't have seen a lot of use over in California, but here in England, that is definitely essential. Also, we've got our spare wheel, and here you can see it's one of the very desirable outer rim type Volkswagen wheels mounted up here above the fuel tank. And here, now there's a lot of things to be interested, excited, intrigued about with this car. Now the first thing you might find is the fact that it's a 4-door. Now you'd imagine being on a floor pan of a Karmann Ghia, which is basically a wide Beetle, it's only going to be a 2-door, but no, they've managed to squeeze this into a proper 4-seater. These doors haven't got a lot in the way of crash protection because they're just an outer skin with more pressed kind of rib design to give them strength and take away the drumming and flexibility, and an internal door card made of steel as well, so it's one door box. Now the outside door handle is fairly normal, fairly standard, unexciting. The inside one though is in this cutaway just here. It's basically the internal workings of a door with a bit of plastic put on the end so don't cut yourself, move up and down to lock and unlock and pull it towards yourself to open. That is your inside door handle. Basic in the extreme. Right, let's get in now, and that is also a bit of a challenge because although it is basically a Volkswagen Beetle that's been raised up on taller suspension on those big off-road tyres, they kind of left the steering wheel at the same height of the original Beetle, which makes getting in and squeezing your legs under the wheel a bit tricky. And then there's driving position, because the pedals apparently have been mounted for the passenger, or I've got a right-hand drive floor pan with left-hand drive steering wheel, because they are over here right by the transmission tunnel. The reason being really is because the position of the front wheels is such that you're right in front of you where you want the pedal is kind of the back of the wheel well, so the clutch is directly underneath the steering shaft, the brake is to the right of that, and the accelerator is far to the right of that. You can have windows put back onto the doors. They lift off and can be chucked in the back or left in the garage at home. They've been left off for the time being because it looked kind of cool without it, but it's turning out to be quite chilly today, so I'm starting to regret that decision. In terms of creature comforts and amenities, there are few. We have got, on the door, we've got, well, basically nothing. You'll notice how high up this sill rises up. This, I guess, is where the strength for having a 4-door comes from, because this big box section sill and this transmission tunnel running down the centre give it a lot of longitudinal strength to the floor pan. That does shut with a, well, it's a bit of a hollow clang, a good firm thump, so that does feel fairly secure. There's a little weird hook on the back of that just to hang your seatbelt on. So there's nothing else on the door. You can use the internal space of the door itself as a cubby hole, because they have ringed it with this kind of nylon vinyl stuff so you don't cut yourself on there. On the dashboard we have got a grab bar, so if you're going off-roading, because this was kind of aimed particularly in the Americas after the Baja racers and the dune buggies and kind of craze, to be a bit of an off-roader, a fun off-roader. So you've got a grab bar there for the passenger to cling onto for dear life. Interestingly, the windscreen wiper motor is on the inside with you, rather than tucked away underneath the bonnet, the front area. Wow, I didn't notice this when I was standing outside the car, so I'll get out and show you this in more detail. We have got connected cantilever wipers. Oh wow, certain Mr. Seabrook could be very excited by that. The dash top underneath this grab handle and recessed for the wiper motor has got a padded roll bar at the top, so it does give you a small amount of crash protection-ish. The engine being in the back, there's no actual heater, but it does have the herb spatcher heater under the bonnet as well. And you've got a couple of controls here dealing with that, just kind of scattered randomly to the left of the steering wheel. And the light switch, again, just seemingly someone had a drill and a button and just stuck it about there. What is notable though by the light switch is this label, which is in German, French, and of course English in the middle. Switch off heater when filling up, because the fuel tank is in the front and the heater is in the front. So you don't really want a petrol burning heater going at it when you're putting petrol vapor and fumes around the front of the car. Important safety tip, thanks Ray. Over to the right of the wheel we have one more switch, which is the hazard warning switch. Obviously it's a Volkswagen from the 70s, it still works. And we have the little control here for the heater.
and a little metal hanger that someone has added at some point in the car's life, which looks like it might have hung a CB on it. That would be a very cool thing to have in here. Off to the other side in front of the passenger, there's not a glove box, it's just a massive cubby. It's metal bottomed, metal backed, it's just a big hole where you can put stuff, which is kind of the way this car goes. There's no frivolity, no frippery, no additional expense, because it's an army vehicle, so you don't want to be having to waste time opening and closing things. If you need to get weaponry of some kind out of there in a hurry, you don't want to be opening the glove box lid. And finally, in front of the driver, the only instrument on this car is the speedometer, which goes up to 100 miles an hour. That's optimistic, and everything is built into it. In the top of the center of the dial, there's the fuel gauge, there's the mileometer, the odometer, telling you how far this car has gone, which is 32,000 miles, nowhere, and indicators for oil, handbrake, hazard lights, basically the absolute basics are all in this one small dial. Then you come onto the steering column itself, which is from, I'm not sure which car this is from, I think it's a 1303 Beetle, but I stand to be corrected, and I'm sure you will let me know in the comments, because I will have got that wrong. Off the back of it, we've got the indicators and main beam on the left, and the wipers and washers on the right. I need to try those wipers in a second. And we've got the hard plastic rimmed steering wheel, which is still in astonishingly good condition, which has got the Wolfsburg castle in the centre, the way Volkswagen should have. So we'll go back to the dashboard. The front pull is over in the big passenger cubby, and underneath the dashboard we have an amenity in the form of one ashtray. Well, there's no 12-volt socket, no lighter. There is what appears to be there is a 5-watt lamp here, but it's missing its bulb, so perhaps you could, I don't know, take the bulb out and spark a cigarette off that somehow. I don't know, I'm not a smoker, so I don't really know how easy it is to ignite those things. Now, moving down below the dashboard, there's nothing so wasteful as carpet, or indeed any kind of floor covering. You can just see the painted back of the metal of the wheel arches. If you off-road on gravel, this would be absolutely deafening, because there's nothing, there's no carpet, no sound deadening, none of the stuff that would normally take all that away from you and sort of hide the experience. It is absolutely raw and visceral driving this car. You can see the cables running through from the front area back to the engine bay, and on the floor, interestingly, this is quite a cool thing. It's like a boat inspired thing, because potentially you can be sort of getting in swimming trunks, wet, dirty, having done sort of sporting activities. This is an outdoor car for doing fun outdoor stuff in. So it's got this wood slatted floor, so you can tread on that with wet feet, wet shoes. It shouldn't be too slippery, and water can just run through and not be kind of sat on there. In front of that, on the driver's side, we have the pedals, which are traditionally the floor hinged ones, which do take a little bit of getting used to, because they have quite a heavy spring, and they can just kind of kick back a little more. They take a little bit of practice to kind of drive smoothly, but once you've got it, you've got it. Although on this particular car, the position of the steering wheel means it's, for me anyway, it's a little hard to bring my foot up. Then we've got the gear shift. It's a lovely wooden gear knob. It looks just like an old 911 or 912. You push it down and back for reverse. You can just feel the mechanical clickiness of that mechanism. It's lovely. And of course, being a 1970s car, metal handle for a mechanical handbrake. Then we've got the seats. These are black vinyl covered, so hard wearing, waterproof, weatherproof. They don't show any signs of wear, because the car's only got, as I say, 32,000 miles on it. They're rather comfortable, actually. You can see how deep the base is, and it's nicely sprung. Obviously, there's no headrests, and the back could come a little further up, but they're quite comfortable. You can spend a fair while in this and not be uncomfortable. My mention of the T-shelf on this particular car will be extremely brief, because there is none. The only T-shelf free on this car is on the outside, on the big flat bonnet. So you park up somewhere, go to your sporting, outdoorsy, bike riding, canoeing, kayaking, whatever trekking event, and have your cup of tea on there. That's a nice bit of cantilever rod action there. And it self-parks as well. And the back of this thing is as Spartan and utilitarian as the front. These rear seats, if you pull this incredibly hard metal lever, you can fold the seat backs down, and you've got a large stowage area back here. And these seats are metal backed, so you're not going to be damaging anything by pushing things in there. I believe this bench will fold forward as well, but I haven't worked out how to do that yet, so I'm not going to break it, because it's not my car to break. It's a big step over into the back, same as in the front. Oh, similar kind of door cubby, which doubles as a door pull, and the same funny door handles. With the driver's seat in my position, there's not really a lot of legroom in the rear, but with the front passenger seat pushed further forward, it looks a lot more comfortable. Like in the front, there are lap belts only, but even with the hood up, there's masses of headroom because this canopy is so tall, so high above you. So that was the thing that carried over from the old Beetles, and that the headroom was just crazy good. This bench seat is astonishingly basic. It is just a vinyl padded cushion running the full width of the car. But surprisingly, it's not uncomfortable at all. It's all right. You could use a bit more back support and a headrest of some kind. This is it. There are zero amenities. Forget loudspeakers, courtesy lights, armrests. You sit in it and you go a place. That is the extent of your involvement with the back of this car. Now, before you complain that I haven't put the hood down, it's quite a lot of manual labour to do that, and they're quite busy in the garage there today. So I've not bothered them to help me take it down because I don't want to risk breaking it, and I don't want them to have to take time off from doing what they're doing to do it. This is not an MX-5. Oh God, I can't get out. So off we go in the thing. It's a weird thing to drive, this thing. Not worried about the left-hand drive element of it, that's fine. But the driving position is really odd. The steering wheel is set so low on the dashboard that I can barely move my legs around it. And the pedals are madly offset to the right-hand side. So I'm in a bizarre driving position. People kind of make a fuss about Italian cars having a strange driving position, but this is way worse. I'm a trifle worried about my camera today because there's nothing to sucker mount my big camera to. So I've actually got a tripod stood up on the back of the car with a sandbag on it, and I'm hoping it doesn't leave the car at any point during the shoot. That weird driving position of my left leg does mean it's slightly tricky, kind of getting a smooth gear change, lifting off the clutch onto the biting point. And when I set off, Wayne said that it feels surprisingly quick. And the thing is, the 0 to 60 on this car is 24 seconds, which is not quick in anyone's book. But maybe it's because you're so open and exposed to the elements. Maybe it's the engine noise. But it does actually feel quite rapid. The gear change is quite nice, and I do love this wooden gear knob, which looks like it's straight out of an early 911. And those big kind of semi-off-road tyres do give it quite a nice cushioned ride. And surprisingly, considering it's a remote gear change to the back of the car, the gear change is actually quite sort of slick and accurate, because that kind of thing can sometimes be, pretty baggy and weird, but in this case it's actually quite good. The car feels like it weighs nothing at all at the front. Obviously there's no weight in there at all apart from the fuel tank, I think, in the front. Oh, do you know what? You can drive this in a number of ways. You can have it fully enclosed with the side screens in. You can do what I've done today, take the side screens out and have it as like a semi-open, or you can take this whole fabric roof thing off and have it as a proper convertible with a folded down windscreen laying flat across the bonnet. As it's less than 8 degrees today, I'm starting to regret my choice of no windows. Well, this thing is for sale at Stone Cold Classics at Rootham in Kent at the moment, so if you're interested, head over to their website in the link below and see if they've still got it, or what other really quite interesting cars they have for sale. This model had a fairly short life as a civilian car in different times in different markets, but it ended rather abruptly in the American market, like so many other things, due to new legislation and a bit of an own goal on Volkswagen's part. It had been categorised as a multi-purpose vehicle, but in 1975 they recategorised it as a passenger vehicle. And it didn't meet the new 1975 accident safety legislation, in particular the windscreen one, which said that you had to have a certain amount of distance between you and the glass, or the driver and the glass. In this case there is really none. I'm hitting the glass now with my hand. I don't want to hit it with anything else. But you are very, very aware you're in a mechanical object, a machine. Because you've got your wiper motor just here on the bulkhead, very obvious. Brakes aren't incredible. Oh, let's go up here. Just thrashing away behind you, but that was the rush from 30 to 36. I have got a lap belt, which is like actually an inertia reel lap belt, not really something you see very often. So a little bit of safety going on there. Nothing in the way of padding on the dashboard or even door cards. This is a California car. It was built in Mexico, shipped over to California, where it spent the beginning of its life. And in this colour, on these tyres and hubcaps, you can so see this thing being perfectly at home over there. Just cruising up the Pacific Coast Highway, it would look so at home in, I don't know, San Francisco in particular. It looked cool in LA as well. Long Beach, Redondo, all those kind of places with the roof off and the windscreen down. Here in England, you want the warm day for it, but this bright orange paintwork, the mad styling, it just makes it a real feel-good car. You can't not be happy driving this thing. It just puts a smile on your face. And Volkswagens generally do anyway. But there's no seriousness, no pretension. You can forget this is based on a military vehicle. It's just too much fun. And it is ridiculously slow. I'm doing 40 again now, and it feels like I'm whipping along at illegal speeds. Even though it looks very odd, it does feel so much like a Volkswagen because it is all parts bin components. The steering's from another Volkswagen, the suspension in the back is from a 1303 Beetle, the floor pans are Carman gear. I think I said all this already, but it's all just Volkswagen stuff and it just feels like you're driving a very tall, square Volkswagen. In the past I have mentioned the smell of a car. This one doesn't really smell of anything because it's so open. You have no aroma of anything going on. And the idea to bring the thing, as it was known in America, to the Americas was because of two reasons really. In Mexico they were very fond of Beetles, but the road network was pretty awful and they wanted something that was able to cope with the harsh conditions of basically rough tracks for a lot of the roads, so they wanted like an off-roady kind of Beetle. And in North America, Baja racing was taking off in the 60s, it had taken off in the 60s, and the dune buggy craze was enormous with modified Beetles, and Volkswagen could really see how they could cash in on that. So they wanted to bring this over to America, call it a crazy name, the thing, paint it bright colours, orange, stick it on kind of semi-off-road tyres so it looked knobbly and ready to go, and it was perfect. It was a domestic utility car for Mexico, and it was a fun car for, well, certainly for the West Coast. I'm not sure how this would have gone down in New York in the winter. I'm not sure how big a seller this was in America. I haven't got the sales figures, but it can't have done huge numbers because apart from being a bit weird, let's face it, it was expensive. It was $3,500, which is $1,000 more than a Beetle, and actually slightly more than a Mustang Mach-1. You must have had to really want air-cooled off-road life a lot to be buying this over a Mustang. And Unless you just want to be very individual, in which case it's a no-brainer. If you want to be different from the crowd, don't go with the obvious, then it doesn't get less obvious than this. The closest thing I can say I've driven to this car really would be the wooden car we did back at the beginning of summer, which had a very similar kind of feel and vibe to this. I'm not sure which one I would take over these out of those two. If I was given the choice of the Thing or the Wooden Wonder, I'll link that in the cards above. I'm genuinely not sure which one I would take. Oh, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this really quite interesting thing. One of the more unusual Volkswagens that are out there. If you have, as usual, smash the like and subscribe and the bell notification buttons, and join me again next time when I'm driving something completely different.